Reddit writing prompts. It's 3 a.m. An official phone alert wakes you up. It says do not look at the moon. You have hundreds of notifications. Hundreds of random numbers are sending it's a beautiful night tonight. Look outside. Story 1. Andrew nearly snarled as his phone chimed for what seemed to be the umpteenth time. His shift at the warehouse ended only a few hours ago and it like chickens running around with their heads chopped off whenever he left. It was rare delight to encounter the nights that he was actually permitted to sleep through the night. On top of the texts that were just brimming with simple incompetency, the morons that lit up his phone in the middle of the night always seemed to wake up his wife, Isabel, who suffered from insomnia to begin with. The raise Andrew agreed to that stated he kept his ringer on for these occasions never seemed worth it when he saw Isabel the next day, curled up in the guest room with dark circles under her eyes from her attempts to get away from the constant chiming. Andrew rubbed a hand over eyes to clear them, trying to understand the ridiculous amount of messages, but he must have been more tired than he thought since they didn't make sense. He quickly scrolled through the message previews, finding they all seemed to follow the same pattern, to look at the moon. The moon? What the? Why? It was like a shot to his adrenaline when he saw that some of the messages were coming from Isabel's phone. He shot up from bed, seeing the other side empty, and jumped to his feet. "Hun, what's going on?" Andrew questioned, still scrolling through his phone while walking towards the guest room. The room was at the end of the hallway and the door was wide open. He could see Isabel standing in the middle of the room, arms down by her side and phone clutched in her hand as she gazed out the window. As he grew closer, he could see that she was shaking. "Belle? Honey? What's wrong? Why?" Isabel's body whipped toward him and Andrew couldn't help himself. He froze in place. She ran and shoved her body into the door, slamming it shut and locking it in place. The speed was all wrong though. Andrew had never seen her move that fast. It was insane. It was inhuman. His own body started to tremble when he remembered her eyes. Her pupils were dilated and not a single bit of the green irises he loved so much were left. He was just about to ram his own body into the door, to beg her to let him in and make her explain what is happening, but then she started sobbing. "Andrew. You need to run, you need to hide. I'm so sorry, God, I am so sorry. Run, Andrew, and whatever you do, don't look at the moon." Andrew started pounding his fists on the door and trying to shove his weight against it, but she must have blocked it with something. Despite his shouting and his pleading to be let in, his forgotten phone on the hallway floor seemed to crack through the commotion as the alarms of the emergency alert system distracted him for just a moment. The robotic voice started to play from his phone automatically. "Warning. This is not a test. This is an emergency alert. Do not look at the moon. Warning. This is not it." Andrew thought his distress was at its peak, nothing was making sense and he just needed to get Isabel so they could deal with this together. He just needed to. Her screams started and it struck him cold to the very center of his being. He began pounding and kicking at the door until it gave way under his body. Isabel was on the floor, writhing in the moonlight. Andrew couldn't help it, his knees buckled and he emptied the contents of his stomach right where he stood. Isabel's body was bent at every wrong angle possible but she wasn't screaming anymore. Her head snapped in his direction with that ungodly speed again. Bathed in the moon's light and pupils still completely dilated, she smiled up at him as if every bone in her body wasn't broken. In the same voice she used to soothe him time after time, she whispered, "Look at the moon, Andrew." Story 2. I didn't really know what to think of it. Don't look at the moon? Sure, no problem. Going back to sleep now. But then I saw my other notifications. 99 plus? Okay, something is definitely up. I tried to call my girlfriend, but I noticed one of the texts I got was from her. "You really should go look at the moon, it's amazing." I flip on the telly to see if there's any coverage on what the hell is going on but it just says it's off the air. Flip to another channel, same thing. Okay, I'm starting to freak out about this point. Get my laptop, check out Reddit, everything on all is urging people to look at the moon. I try to call my parents, my sister, my friends, no answer from any of them. I'm sitting on the floor with my knees tucked under my chin, rocking slightly back and forth. There's a part of me that just wants to run outside and stare upwards, give in to the madness. Somehow I repress that urge. Then I notice something strange. The window. It's 20 till 4 but the light coming in through the window is getting more intense. I watched a pale beam stream in, casting an eerie glow into the room. Moonlight doesn't look like that. Moonlight can't look like that. I closed my eyes real tight. I began to cry. I waited. I sat there on the floor, crying like a child, hiding from the unnatural light under the covers. My blanket was thick, yet the cruel light kept peeking through the threads. I began to hyperventilate. The closeness of my breath under the blanket was hard to bear, but I did not dare uncover myself for air. I tried to distract myself with my phone, checked for updates, tried to get a hold of anyone, but to no avail. Still the same messages over and over, tempting me. Just a couple of hours and the sun will come up. Then I'll be safe, I thought to myself. 2 hours later. Dawn had not come. 3 hours later. Dawn had not come. I risked a small opening of the cover so I could look at the room. Not only had the light intensified, it now seemed to engulf my room in a maddening pale light. Presently I became aware of a constant humming. I listened to try and identify the source, but it was unlike anything I had heard before. Like the whir of some inhuman machinery. My mind began to race. I cried out for someone, anyone to come and save me, to end this nightmare. But no one came. I lay there on my floor, in a state bordering madness for another 5 hours. After the 3rd hour I began to babble to myself. With every hour the whir seemed to get louder and closer. My room was now lit up like a movie set. I maneuvered myself under the bed, but the vile light had stolen the shadows from even there. Throughout the day the urge to uncover myself and run laughing and screaming into the streets grew stronger, and I had to stop myself from jumping up at regular intervals. The whir was now being accompanied by a constant thrumming which preyed my weakened sanity. I like to believe that I lasted longer than anyone else, in the end. I began to beat my head against the floor, in an attempt to shut out the unceasing noise. Eventually I was slamming it so hard I believe I gave myself a concussion. I couldn't take it anymore. All at once I wriggled out from under the bed in my cocoon, threw the blankets off of me and darted out my door. I ran down the hallway where even here the light had spread itself, even in a place with no windows. Down the stairs and up to the front door. I nearly tore it off its hinges on my way out. Well, it wasn't a moon. The eyes are what gave it away. Though they were right. It really was quite beautiful. Story 3. It wasn't my phone that woke me up, but my wife. She's always been a lighter sleeper than me, and even though I had it on silent, the constant stream of notification vibrations was making the phone chuck and jive all over my nightstand. Honey. Ha-oo-oo-oo-oo-oonie. Honey. I came awake to a rough shake accompanying the words. Yewa. I managed, blearily. Your phone. Somebody is blowing you up. Must be my other girlfriend. An old joke, wildly inappropriate considering what was to follow. MMHHMM. She mumbled, already well on her way back to sleep. I checked the bedside clock, the red LED showing 3 a.m. on the nose. Weird. I leaned awkwardly, half awake, and grabbed my phone, and had to do a double take when I saw the notifications. 186 texts, 93 missed calls, and 1 emergency notification. What? The actual fuck? I thought, okay, this is a dream, must be a dream. I don't even know 186 people. Okay. Must be a natural disaster on the way. Or did Kim Jong-un launch nukes at the West Coast? Shit. With slightly shaking hands, I thumbed the official notification, expecting the worst. I held my breath. Do not look at the moon. Wait, what? The feeling of surreal vertigo intensified. The logical part of my brain was continuing to insist that this must be a dream, must be a dream, must be. Shut up, shut up. I whispered to myself, climbing out of bed. I was awake now, fully, rigidly awake, and so I decided to take my phone to the living room to investigate further. Plopping down on the couch, I started scrolling through texts. Curiouser and curiouser, I mumbled to myself, looking at the texts. None of them from numbers I recognized. Some of them ... not even from phone numbers. Entries from numbers with only 8 digits, or 6, or 2. Entries with letters and numbers mixed together. Entries with letters and numbers and Chinese characters mixed in. emojis and symbols mixed in. My disquiet was growing steadily. I clicked the first message. Wow, look at the moon. It's so big and beautiful. Amazing, isn't it? So, okay, my brain responded. Not a dream. A practical joke. Someone is messing with me. With my phone. I wonder if my wife is in on this. I clicked the next text. It's such a beautiful night tonight. Just look. The moon looks amazing. It's so big. Look at the moon. Wow, it looks so cool. Look, honey. Something about the honey sent a chill up my spine. My wife, shaking me awake, popped back into my mind, unbidden. Look at that moon out over the water, honey. It looks so huge, so close to the horizon. Why does it do that? It's such a beautiful night, honey, look. Wow, the moon looks awesome. And as I was reading these, I realized I could hear a voice speaking the words. Quietly, like they were coming from very far away, repeating, looping over each other, blurring, speeding up, slowing down, warping. Look at the moon, go outside, look at the moon, go outside, look at the moon, it's a beautiful night, go look at the moon. Mustering all the calm I could, I set my phone, face down, on the couch. Some still logical functionality commanded me to turn on the TV. Turn on the news. Yes. Normalcy. Emergency broadcast system. Yes. That's a good idea. I turned it on. It's 3 a.m., surely more than a minute has passed, but it says 3 a.m., right there in the corner of the screen, 3 a.m. PDT, and even though it's the middle of the night, there's Anderson Cooper, and he's staring at me. I swear he's looking right at me, and suddenly turning on the news seems like it was a really bad idea. West Coast residents are being warned tonight not to look at the moon. Authorities are warning that looking at the moon might destroy your life and could unravel the very fabric of reality. Ben, do not look at the moon. I pressed the power button again on the remote and the TV shut off. Heart trying to thud its way out of my chest, I stood, and walked back towards my bedroom. Somehow, I knew before I opened the door that my wife would be awake, and she was. She was sitting up, her face lit by her phone screen. I shouldn't have told you to look at the moon, honey. I'm sorry. Wait, what? Are you in on this too? What is going on? She looked down, and started crying. I'm sorry, honey. I'm so sorry. I rushed over and sat down hard on the bed, right in front of her. Sorry for what? I demanded, panic seizing control of me as I grabbed her shoulders. Sorry for what? What the fuck is going on? Sorry for what? She stopped crying, and smiled. Her eyes were far away, glazed, almost robotic. Oh wow. She said, wow, honey, it's such a beautiful night tonight. Just look at the moon. I let go of her shoulders, and stood up. I walked calmly, out of the room, out through the living room to the hall to the back door. I threw it open, feeling like my arms and legs were moving on their own. Like I was merely a passenger. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I stepped out, into my backyard. I tilted my head to the sky, and I looked at the moon. And then I remembered. God help me, I remembered. Driving along, southbound on Coast Highway, coming home from a long night. She was tired, dried sweat had warped her perfect hairdo, but she still looked radiant. Face lit by the dash lights, and of course, by the moon. She had sung her heart out tonight, and the crowd had eaten it up. She was a bright shining star, tonight. Hanging out there, seeming mere inches from the horizon, the big, swollen, full face of the moon. Just about to set. Oh wow. She said, wow, honey, it's such a beautiful night tonight. Just look at the moon. And I did. I took my eyes off the road, and I did. She was right, of course. It was beautiful. I sighed. And then I heard an awful sound, like a loud pop, and we were upside down, flying, weightless, like somehow we had been pulled by the moon into space. The car was full of weird things floating through the air, coins, a pen cap, her mic had even floated in from the back into the front. I had one last look at her face. It was still transitioning from the marvel at the beauty of the moon to the shock of the crash. I tried to reach out my hand, but I seemed to be moving through jello. The moon filled the windshield, seemed to get even bigger, brighter, turned the sky white, turned the whole world white. I wept a little then. Not as much as I would, later, but a little. You know the rest, I said when I had regained my composure. I came out of the coma. I woke up here. The officer stared at me, and I could tell she was struggling to keep her face impassive. She felt bad for me, but she didn't want to. I'm sorry for your loss, she said, looking down at her notepad. She hadn't taken down a single word of it. Can you tell me how much you'd had to drink that night? I sighed again. Could I? No, not really. Quite a few. Too fucking many. No, I answered. No, I don't think I can. She nodded. You're going to need a lawyer. When you're ready to get out of here, I mean. I looked down at my broken body. Just a mess of wires and tubes and casts. Yeah, was all I could muster. She stood, and walked toward the door of my hospital room. She put her hand on the door, and without turning, she asked, Do you think if you'd obeyed the warning, you'd still be in the coma? Yes, I said, quietly. Yes, I do. Story 4. Have you heard the wolf howl? The sound that echoes in your bones, that makes needles race across your skin. My grandmother used to say that all wolves howl from instinct. In memory of something long before, in connection with their ancestors. And the dogs, they howl from the remnants of instinct from when they were wolves. From the part of them that remembers the pack, the hunt, the fury. She said what makes us human is forgetting our instincts. Left in the wild, how few of us would survive. How many would know how to stalk prey, would remember how to survive snow naked, or how to hide from the hungry tiger? Few. Tonight, when the moon rose, it was as if there was a presence over my shoulders, as if I could hear a distant musical note but not see the instrument. For I was in the tunnels deep below the earth, in one of the few remaining coal mines, and shielded from the radiance above. My team stiffened at midnight, casting their eyes upwards, searching the rock, their eyes finding nothing against the stone and support beams. And at 6 a.m., we boarded the mine shaft, each of us stopping at the time clock to claim our hours. That was when the cell phones started to buzz. Deep underground, it's impossible for the signal to penetrate. You're cut off not only from the sky, but from all life. All humanity. And now, just a few dozen feet below the surface, the flood began. Jim's phone started first, the ringtone not changed in over a decade, his wrinkles deepening as he stared at the screen. In all the time I had known Jim, I'd never heard that ringtone. I'd never seen his screen light up, or his fingers pedal across a keyboard that still used T9. But now, the device wouldn't stop vibrating long enough for him to type an answer. Sally's went off next. Sally, whose screen was so cracked that his nearly cut her finger as she swiped, and who had added a case thicker than her hard hat as a countermeasure to future damage. But the damage was already done, and no case could undo it. Funny, how she didn't protect it until no longer necessary. Like her husband, who cheated on her after they fought every night for a month, and now she spread mortar over the cracks in a marriage that would never recover. My phone, at 4% battery, was last. As the 20 other miners trickled out of the tunnel, I switched off airplane mode, which I had been on to keep it from dying. I'd been saving it to call my own wife. It had been 6 months since our last date, but little Jimmy was sleeping over at a friend's tonight. And I'd been saving change for weeks to take her to Gio's, where we had first met, to share a Chicago pizza. Maybe even a milkshake after, if we could splurge. But before I could call, my phone also started to vibrate. And 4% turned to 3%. From Jimmy. Dad, you have to see this. Meet me at the baseball field. From my wife. Honey, come home soon, let's stay in the garden and look at the stars. 3% turned to 2%. From Amanda, my college girlfriend. Hi Jacob, I know it's been years since we last talked, but I just wanted to apologize for being a bitch when we broke up. Not that you weren't a jerk. Smile. But anyways, if you're looking for some fun, let's take a walk in the park. Maybe we can hide in the bushes. From the astronomy club I had went to once, who kept my phone number since last September. Jacob, you will not believe what's in the sky. You don't need a telescope to see this. 2% became 1, and my phone began to wail. It was like one of those Amber Alerts, where a child goes missing, and you're supposed to watch for a license plate. But this message contained neither a child or plate. I'd been walking as I read the messages, but now I stopped, the rest of the group exiting 20 yards ahead of me into the moonlight. I could hear their phones wailing as well, but none bothered to look. Instead, they looked up, while I looked down. Stay inside. Hide, lock your doors, and await emergency services. But when I blinked, the message changed while the phone refreshed. Unlock your doors, and await emergency services outside. The screen turned dark as the last remaining trickle of battery failed, and the lights in the tunnel flickered. Ahead, glancing at the reflecting moonlight, something tugged at my mind. A distant memory that seemed like a word on the tip of my tongue. An excitement, a mission, something calling to me. A terrible purpose. I swallowed, then looked back towards the group. Their heads tilted back, and their mouths opened, their pupils dilating despite the light. Their shoulders turned rigid and they stood on their tiptoes as their voices cut through the night, as they shouted into the sky. But I edged backwards into the darkness as they sprinted away together, as a pack. I slept there that night, waiting for daylight, the mine echoing with the sound they had made before leaving and making me shake. They have remembered the how. And with the rising sun, I walk among wolves. Story 5. My hand reached out from the messy nest of blankets I was buried under, and flopped onto the buzzing phone on my dresser. Blurry-eyed and dazed, I dragged it under the blankets with me, refusing to let myself be fully roused from a solid night's sleep. What the fuck, I muttered to myself, nearly mumbling the words out loud. With a pained squint of too much brightness far too suddenly, I looked at the screen and saw, Jesus, had to be hundreds of notifications, at least. Which was weird enough, me getting messages from 100+ people? Not enough people like me for that to be a common occurrence. But weirder still was they all said the same exact thing, it's a beautiful night tonight. Look outside. Bitches, it's basically morning, I thought. But before I could move, let alone shake the cozy cocoon of blankets from my head to look out my window and see what could possibly be so damn beautiful, my phone buzzed again. I practically jumped as it shocked my hand. There was a new message, but this one said something different. Do not look at the moon. What? This time I actually did speak out loud. Frustration now fully replaced by curiosity and a racing heart, I kicked the blankets off and staggered down the hall to my roommate's bedroom. Moan? I called, knocking on her closed door. Moan was short for Monica. We had only been roommates for a short time, me, in desperate need of a new apartment, and her, with a newly empty house gifted by her parents, but friends for about a year. There was no answer. I tried again. Moan? You up? I shivered, which was odd. Sure, I was dressed only in a long t-shirt but it had been spring for weeks now, it should have been enough to feel warm in this house. I heard a loud thud and bang from inside Monica's room. Monica? Are you okay? When still there was no answer, I threw open the door. There was Monica, hanging from the light fixture. Her heavy wooden desk stool lay toppled on the floor beneath her. Oh my God! I screamed, Monica. I raced to her feet, held them, grabbed the stool and placed them under her feet. But her body had gone extraordinarily limp in such a short time. Phone in hand, I called 911. Busy signal. What? How? I pulled the phone away from my ear, my other arm still wrapped around Monica's ice-cold legs. The blaring sound seemed to fill the air as I tried to comprehend how this could be possible. Alright, no problem, let's try again, I thought, swallowing hard and trying not to shake. Busy signal, again. What the hell could be happening, I thought, feeling the stirrings of real panic start to fill my body. There was a TV in Monica's room. I gingerly placed Monica's feet on the table, then ran to grab the remote sitting on her night table. I clicked, and my eyes were suddenly swimming in the bright colors and video of new Channel 1. Almost instantly, I felt my knees buckle from under me. Sources are reporting a sweep of suicides all over the nation, the newscaster was saying in a somber and serious tone. Her blood-red lipstick matched her blazer as she went on, mouth uttering words that made me believe this all could only be a dream. 911 is overwhelmed with floods of calls. Police called to hundreds upon thousands of scenes of jumpers immediately shot themselves upon looking upward. No one is quite yet sure as to what the correlation might be. I turned away from the TV, staring down at the phone in my hand. I looked over to Monica's desk and picked up her phone. She too, had hundreds of the look outside texts. But the one she didn't have, the warning not to look at the moon. My breath grew ragged, shallow, As I scrolled through her notifications and could not find a warning anywhere. And all I could think was, why me?